What is up, you guys? Thank you for clicking on this video. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to go through the Vinyl Tag 2020 Quarantine Edition. Let's get into the video. Hey everyone, welcome to this video. My name is Lucy Claire. This is going to be my first foray into the VC here on YouTube. Before I jump into answering the Vinyl Tag questions, I thought I would tell you a little bit more about myself and my collecting journey so far so that we can kind of get to know each other before I bombard you with a bunch of my record picks. I started collecting records, I think about 6 years ago. In 2014-ish is when I really got into the collecting craze. I was helping my grandpa clean out his attic space and came across this box of 101 Strings records that my grandma had used in her geography course in her middle school classroom, and those were really the first records that I'd ever been exposed to. He was nice enough to let me take them home, and my love for physical media and vinyl especially kind of spiraled out of control after that point, something that I think a lot of you can relate to. So now that you know where I started and kind of a little bit more about me, I thought I would give couple caveats to my channel and my collecting strategy, I would say, for those of you that already have questions about me being a college student and collecting vinyl as a young person. Okay, so caveat number one is I am a young collector, and I know that's true. And compared to some members of the VC that I've seen here on YouTube, I have a miniature collection. At this moment, I think my records clock in at about 250 to 300 records. That number is steadily growing. So this caveat is really just me trying to say I am by no means an expert on vinyl, but I do have a serious passion for record collecting and for music and music history, so I just thought I would jump in head first and try to learn from all of you while sharing as well. I also want to say, as a younger collector and someone who's a college student on a budget, I am definitely collecting where I can, and mostly that's at thrift stores and in yard sales and all that. So my music may not be the best quality. Mine is very much slapped together, but I really enjoy the stuff that I have, so I hope that you will as well. Caveat number two is that my music style is very eclectic, so I don't prescribe to one genre, I don't prescribe to an era. I say this as a caveat because it means that there will be stuff in my collection that some people think is junk and some people think is treasure, and that's kind of the beauty of collecting. I just want to share what I'm passionate about with you and hope that you feel the same way. And if not, click past the ones you don't enjoy and we'll all get along. The last thing is not really a caveat, but more of just a worth mentioning. I love to learn about records and music history, so if you have any advice or knowledge that you'd like to share, please put them down in the comments. I'm really happy to have my channel be a place for conversation about physical media and music and vinyl records, so blow up the comment section. Okay, so with all of those things out of the way, let's jump into the Vinyl Tag 2020 Quarantine Edition. Question number one in the Vinyl Tag is favorite record from your home city or state. I live in Oregon, and there are not many recording artists that are super famous that are from my home state. I picked a band that has spent a lot of time in Oregon, so without further ado, I picked the Robert Cray Band Strong Persuader album for this question. Robert Cray and the band started in Eugene, Oregon. It was recorded on the Mercury label and released in 1986. My favorite songs from the album are Foul Play and Right Next Door. Robert Cray himself is known for saying that Portland feels like home to him, and he and the band have often played in our famous Waterfront Blues Festival. The second question in the tag is an album that you highly recommend. I could not recommend any album more than Dire Straits' self-titled, their first album, So Dire Straits, Dire Straits. It is just a phenomenal piece of musical art and sort of what launched them into a very long career. Not maybe the band, but Mark Knopfler himself, just a genius on the guitar. It was released on Warner Brothers Records in 1978. I chose this album because my dad is a diehard fan of Mark Knopfler. I've been to several of his concerts. I grew up listening to his music. My college essay was about how much Mark Knopfler means to me. I could not recommend it enough. My favorite songs from that album are Lions, Wild West End, Water of Love, basically the entire album, so please listen to it if you haven't. The third question in the tag is a tip for a beginner. As a young collector, I still feel like a beginner, and I know to most of you I am a beginner, so I don't know that I really have the knowledge base to be giving advice to others, but what I would say is do not be intimidated, and I say that in all capital letters. Do not be intimidated. Collecting in itself is an art, and if you're passionate about it, it doesn't matter how many records you have, what the quality of your records are, what the quality of your gear is. Keep in mind that the music is really what it's about. It's not about how big your collection is or how long you've been collecting or how much you know. Anyway, you don't have to go from one record to 300 in a week. You don't have to collect all your favorite albums all at once. It's a gradual process, so just do it your way. The fourth question is an album that got you into deeper music. Now, deeper music is a relative term. In my grasp on music reality, deeper music doesn't really mean one thing, so I chose something that kind of rocketed me into my vinyl obsession. The first record that really got me into deeper music is Artie Shaw's Moonglow. It's one of the foremost records that he put out. I mean, most of his albums were just compilations of things that he had performed. This record was released on RCA Victor in 1956, and it was one of the first albums that my grandpa gave to me with the 101 Strings records. My favorites in particular are Begin the Beguine, which is a classic, and Stardust. Question number 5 is an obscure record that many people may not know about or may not have. I chose Martin Luther King Jr.'s Free at Last. This album was released on Motown in 1985. This album is just a collection of speeches and sermons that he gave in the year 1968. And of course, it includes his famous I Have a Dream, Free at Last speech. It may not be a super popular album. I don't know, maybe it is. I have yet to see it in a VC video, so I thought I would share it with you all. So number 6 is a group or an artist who you try to collect all of the albums for. And that's not as easy for me. I have quite a few artists that I'm trying to be a completionist for, but the one that stands out to me the most is Glen Campbell. I love country music, especially older country music, and Glen Campbell is just, in my mind, an icon. All of his albums are just excellent collections. Try a Little Kindness, Southern Nights, Gentle on My Mind. I mean, those are some of his most famous ones, but there's a reason they're famous. Okay, the 7th question is a band whose second album is better than their first album. And this was kind of hard for me because I had to do some serious research into the artists that I had. Out of them, who did I have 2 albums of and who did I have the second album of? But I came to an artist that I had both, and that is James Taylor. His first album was a self-titled album, and then second came Sweet Baby James on Warner Brothers Records in 1970. In my opinion, and kind of in chart history, his self-titled album was good, but this album had Fire and Rain, Sweet Baby James, those really classic James Taylor songs that we all love and enjoy. I think the success of this album alone kind of speaks to the mastery that he produced on the second go. The 8th question is a whack-a-mole album. So I did a randomizer on Discogs and I came to this album. It is Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, the soundtrack. I couldn't be more proud that this was my random record. It was released on Atlantic in 1982 and is just great for some really, really wacky listening. I mean, obviously there's some cinematic music on it, but mostly it's just that great space fun that the 80s is known for. 9 is an album that you have listened to the most. That was relatively easy for me. I came to the conclusion that this Patsy Cline Greatest Hits record is the most listened to album in my collection. I've listened to it like probably 200 and 250 times. The 10th question is share an album with a crazy story. And I'm assuming they mean a crazy story about production or something, but I kind of took it in on my own, and I'm going to share a crazy story with you all that happened to me and my family. So I chose the Tiki Room album. The reason that I said this is a crazy story is because my family, whenever we visit Disneyland, we always visit the Tiki Room. It is the last attraction that we visit. We all gather around at midnight for the final showing, and it's usually just us in the Tiki Room. It's a really fantastic display of Walt Disney's mastery. So here it is. So the 11th question is your collecting pet peeve. I end up moving things a lot, and it's hard to drag now 300 and some records around from place to place when you move. The 12th question is an album that people would be surprised to know that you like. For my surprise record, I chose this commemorative edition of inaugural addresses by different presidents. This commemorative album was released in 1972 for the Jim Keyser campaign in California. He was a Democratic statesman and released these albums as part of his political campaign, which I just think is super cool. This album may not be everyone's cup of tea, but it's a real awesome listen for those history buffs out there. I know that I am one. My favorite speech on this album is Kennedy's, of course. So the 13th question is an album from the year that you were born. My music taste really takes me away from modern music most of the time, so I don't have a lot of physical media that date past 1995. It's not quite accurate, but I'm going to pretend that it's my birth into the vinyl community. The album that I'm choosing for this is Adele's 25. This was released on the Columbia label in 2015, so a year after I found those records in my grandpa's attic. And my favorite songs from this album are Water Under the Bridge and A Million Years Ago. They're all good. Her voice is amazing. Question 14 is share your opinion of 10-inch records. I think that 10-inch shellac records are really cool. I think that they're not as easy to get your hands on. It makes it a little bit more rare. I'm excited to listen to them when I can get a hold of something that will play those 10-inch shellacs. 15 is share an interesting fact about an album. I'm going to choose Dean Tex Martin Country Style. This was released on Reprise Records in 1963. Dean was kind of famous for being a crooner and adopting different attitudes and characters when he was singing and releasing full albums in those characters. This particular album, as a lover of country music, always makes me laugh because I feel like his voice doesn't quite fit the genre, but it was good on him for trying. My favorite songs from this album are Blue Blue Day and Anytime. Number 16 is show an album with an animal on the cover art. For this question, I chose John Denver's Airy. As you can see, there's an eagle with John Denver there on the cover. This was released on RCA Victor in 1971. I think my version doesn't really do the cover justice, but you can kind of see why I chose this album. My favorite songs from this album are All of My Memories and Tools. Number 17 is show an album with crazy artwork. That's not too hard to do. A lot of albums have really cool artwork. I chose Matthew Wilder's I Don't Speak the Language. This album was released on Private Eye Records in 1983. I recently adopted this album from my parents' 80s collection, but I love basically all the songs on this album. I Don't Speak the Language is a great song. The Kid's American is a great song. I love this album. It's really cool, and the artwork is just all kinds of crazy fun. Number 18 is show a really good album that you can find for cheap, and for me that's basically all my albums, but I chose one in particular. For this question, I chose Peggy Lee's All Aglow Again. This album was released on Capitol Records in 1960. I found this album for 50 cents at my local record store. My favorite songs are Where Do I Go From Here and You Deserve. Okay, number 19 is show an album with an acquired taste. For this question, I chose Walt Disney's Fantasia. This version was released on Buena Vista Records in 1982. This album was a re-release for the movie that came out again in 1982. This has everything from orchestral sound to Baroque sound, all the way around, totally Walt Disney. And finally, question 20 is show your most recent find. So I am showing you the Top Gun soundtrack. This was released on Columbia in 1986 with the movie. I'm excited to listen to it. I haven't listened to it yet. I'm a lover of all 80s movies, and I can't wait to listen to the soundtrack of this one. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. Please hit that subscribe button so that we can grow this channel together. If you love music history and you love physical media and vinyl records, this is the place to be. See you next time.